Hello, and welcome back to Baby Alice's Stories. We now return to The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. Robin Hood turns butcher. Now, after all these things had happened, and it became known to Robin Hood how the sheriff had tried 3 times to make him captive, he said to himself, "If I have the chance, I will make our worshipful sheriff pay right well for that which he hath done to me. Maybe I may bring him some time into Sherwood Forest and have him to a right merry feast with us." For when Robin Hood caught a baron, or a squire, or a fat abbot or bishop, he brought them to the greenwood tree and feasted them before he lightened their purses. But in the meantime, Robin Hood and his band lived quietly in Sherwood Forest, without showing their faces abroad, for Robin knew that it would not be wise for him to be seen in the neighbourhood of Nottingham, those in authority being very wroth with him. But though they did not go abroad, they lived a merry life within the woodlands, spending the days in shooting at garlands hung upon a willow wand at the end of the glade, the leafy aisles running with merry jests and laughter, for whoever missed the garland was given a sound buffet, which, if delivered by Little John, never failed to topple over the unfortunate yeoman. Then they had bouts of wrestling and of cudgel play, so that every day they gained in skill and strength. Thus they dwelled for nearly a year, and in that time Robin had often turned over in his mind many means of making an even score with the sheriff. At last he began to fret at his confinement. So one day he took up his stout cudgel and set forth to seek adventure, strolling blithely along until he came into the edge of Sherwood. There, as he rambled along the sunlit road, he met a lusty young butcher driving a fine mare, and riding in a stout new cart, all hung about with meat. Merrily whistled the butcher as he jogged along, for he was going to the market, and the day was fresh and sweet, making his heart blithe within him. "Good morrow to thee, jolly fellow," quoth Robin. "Thou seemest happy this merry morn." "Aye, that am I," quoth the jolly butcher, "and why should I not be so? And I not hale in wind and limb? Have I not the boniest lass in all Nottinghamshire? And lastly, am I not to be married to her on Thursday next in sweet Locksley town?" "Ha!" said Robin, "comest thou from Locksley town? Well do I know that fair place for miles about, and well do I know each hedgerow, and gentle pebble stream, and even all the bright little fishes therein, for there I was born and bred. Now where goest thou with thy meat, my fair friend?" "I go to the market at Nottingham town to sell my beef and my mutton," answered the butcher. "But who art thou that comest from Locksley town?" "A yeoman am I, and men do call me Robin Hood." "Now, by Our Lady's grace," cried the butcher, "well do I know thy name, and many a time have I heard thy deeds both sung and spoken of. But heaven forbid that thou shouldest take aught of me. An honest man am I, and have wronged neither man nor maid. So trouble me not, good master, as I have never troubled thee." "Nay, heaven forbid indeed," quoth Robin, that I should take from such as thee, jolly fellow. Not so much as 1 farthing would I take from thee, for I love a fair Saxon face like thine right well, more especially when it cometh from Locksley town, and most especially when the man that owneth it is to marry a bonny lass on Thursday next. But come, tell me for what price thou wilt sell me all of thy meat and thy horse and cart. At 4 marks do I value meat, cart and mare, quoth the butcher. But if I do not sell all my meat, I will not have 4 marks in value. Then Robin plucked his purse from his girdle, and quoth he, Here in this purse are 6 marks. Now I would fain be a butcher for the day, and sell my meat in Nottingham town. Wilt thou close a bargain with me, and take 6 marks for thine outfit? Now may the blessings of all the saints fall on thy honest head, cried the butcher right joyfully, as he leaped down from his cart and took the purse that Robin held out to him. Nay, quoth Robin, laughing loudly, many do like me and wish me well, but few call me honest. Now get thee gone back to thy lass, and give her a sweet kiss from me. So saying, he donned the butcher's apron, and climbing into the cart, he took the reins in his hand and drove off through the forest to Nottingham town. When he came to Nottingham, he entered that part of the market where butchers stood, and took up his inn, in the best place he could find. Next, he opened his stall and spread his meat upon the bench. Then, taking his cleaver and steel and clattering them together, he trotted aloud in merry tones. Stand for selling. Now come ye lasses, and eke ye dames, and buy your meat from me. For 3 pennies worth of meat I sell, for the charge of 1 penny. Lamb have I that hath fed upon naught but the dainty dame's pie, and the violet sweet, and the daffodil that grow fair streams beside. And beef have I from the heathery woods, and mutton from dales all green, and veal as white as a maiden's brow, with its mother's milk, I ween. Then come ye lasses, and eke ye dames, come buy your meat from me. For 3 pennies worth of meat I sell, for the charge of 1 penny. Thus he sang blithely, while all who stood near listened amazingly. Then, when he had finished, he clattered the steel and cleaver still more loudly, shouting lustily, Cling, 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 cling. Now who'll buy, 4 fixed prices I have. 3 pennies worth of meat I sell to a fat friar or priest for 6 pence. For I want not their custom, stout aldermen I charge 3 pence, for it doth not matter to me whether they buy or not. To buxom dames I sell 3 pennies worth of meat for 1 penny, for I like their custom well. But to the bonny lass that hath a liking for a good tight butcher, I charge not but 1 fair kiss, for I like her custom the best of all. Then all began to stare and wonder and crowd around, laughing, for never was such selling heard of in all Nottingham town. But when they came to buy, they found it as he had said, for he gave good wife or dame as much meat for 1 penny as they could buy elsewhere for 3. And when a widow or a poor woman came to him, he gave her flesh for nothing. But when a merry lass came and gave him a kiss, he charged not 1 penny for his meat, and many such came to his stall, for his eyes were as blue as the skies of June, and he laughed merrily, giving to each full measure. Thus he sold his meat so fast that no butcher that stood near him could sell anything. Then they began to talk amongst themselves, and some said, This must be some thief who has stolen cart, horse, and meat. But others said, Nay, when did you ever see a thief who parted with his goods so freely and merrily? This must be some prodigal who hath sold his father's land, and would fain live merrily while the money lasts. And these latter being the greater number, the others came round, one by one, to their way of thinking. Then some of the butchers came to him to make his acquaintance. Come, brother, quoth one, who was the head of them all. We be all of one trade, so wilt thou go dine with us? For this day the sheriff hath asked all the butcher guild to feast with him at the guild hall. There will be stout fare and much to drink, and that thou likest, or I much mistake thee. There will be stout fare and much to drink, and that thou likest, or I much mistake thee. Now beshrew his heart, quoth jolly Robin, that would deny a butcher, and moreover I will go dine with you all, my sweet lads, and that as fast as I can hie. Whereupon, having sold all his meat, he closed his stall, and went with them to the great guild hall. Then the sheriff had already come in state, and with him many butchers, when Robin and those that were with him came in, all laughing at some merry jest he had been telling them. Those that were near the sheriff whispered to him, Yon is a right mad blade, for he hath sold more meat for 1 penny this day than we could sell for 3. And to whatsoever merry lass gave him a kiss, he gave meat for naught. And others said, He is some prodigal that hath sold his land for silver and gold, and meaneth to spend all right merrily. Then the sheriff called Robin to him, not knowing him in his butcher's dress, and made him sit close to him on his right hand, for he loved the rich young prodigal, especially when he thought that he might lighten that prodigal's pockets into his own most worshipful purse. So he made much of Robin, and laughed and talked with him more than with any of the others. At last the dinner was ready to be served, and the sheriff bade Robin say grace. So Robin stood up and said, Now heaven bless us all, and eat good meat and good sack within this house, and may all butchers be and remain as honest men as I am. At this all laughed. The sheriff loudest of all, for he said to himself, Surely this is indeed some prodigal, and perchance I may empty his purse of some of the money that the fool throweth about so freely. Then he spake aloud to Robin, saying, Thou art a jolly young blade, and I love thee mightily. And he smote Robin upon the shoulder. Then Robin laughed loudly too. Yes, quoth he, I know thou dost love a jolly blade, for didst thou not have jolly Robin Hood at thy shooting match, and didst thou not gladly give him a bright golden arrow for his own? At this the sheriff looked grave, and all the guild of butchers too, so that none laughed but Robin. Only some winked slyly at each other. Come, fill us some sack, cried Robin. Let us ere be merry while we may, for man is but dust, and he hath but a span to live here till the worm getteth him, as our good gossip Swanthold saith. So let life be merry while it lasts, say I. Nay, never look down I the mouth, Sir Sheriff. Who knowest but that thou mayest catch Robin Hood yet, if thou drinkest less good sack and malmsey, and bringest down the fat about thy punch, and the dust from out thy brain. Be merry, men! Then the sheriff laughed again, but not as though he liked the jest. While the butchers said one to another, Before heaven, never have we seen such a mad rollicking blade. Mayhap, though, he will make the sheriff mad. How now, brothers, cried Robin, be merry. Nay, never count over your farthings, for by this and by that I will pay this shot myself, e'en though it cost 200 pounds. So let no man draw up his lip, nor thrust his forefinger into his purse, for I swear that neither butcher nor sheriff shall pay 1 penny for this feast. Now thou art a right merry soul, quoth the sheriff, and I wot thou must have many a head of horned beasts, and many an acre of land, that thou dost spend thy money so freely. Ay, that have I, quoth Robin, laughing loudly again. 500 and more horned beasts have I and my brothers, and none of them have we been able to sell, else I might not have turned butcher. As for my land, I have never asked my steward how many acres I have. At this, the sheriff's eyes twinkled, and he chuckled to himself. Nay, good youth, quoth he, if thou canst not sell thy cattle, it may be I will find a man that will lift them from thy hands. Perhaps that man may be myself, for I love a merry youth, and would help such a one along the path of life. Now, how much dost thou want for thy horned cattle? Well, quoth Robin, they are worth at least 500 pounds. Nay, answered the sheriff slowly, and as if he were thinking within himself. Well, I do love thee, and fain would I help thee along, but 500 pounds in money is a good round sum. Besides, I have it not by me, yet I will give thee 300 pounds for them all, and that in good, hard silver and gold. Now thou old miser, quoth Robin, well thou knowest that so many horned cattle are worth 700 pounds and more, and even that is but small of them, and yet thou, with thy grey hairs and 1 foot in the grave, wouldst trade upon the folly of a wild youth. At this the sheriff looked grimly at Robin. Nay, quoth Robin, look not on me as though thou hadst sour beer in thy mouth, man. I will take thine offer, for I and my brothers do need the money. We lead a merry life, and no one leads a merry life for a farthing. So I will close the bargain with thee. But mind that thou bringest a good 300 pounds with thee, for I trust not one that driveth so shrewd a bargain. I will bring the money, said the sheriff. But what is thy name, good youth? Men call me Robert O'Locksley, quoth bold Robin. Then, good Robert O'Locksley, quoth the sheriff, I will come this day to see thy horned beasts. But first my clerk shall draw up a paper in which thou shalt be bound to the sale, for thou gettest not my money without I get thy beasts in return. Then Robin Hood laughed again. So be it, he said, smiting his palm upon the sheriff's hand. Truly my brothers will be thankful to thee for thy money. Thus the bargain was closed, but many of the butchers talked among themselves of the sheriff, saying that it was but a scurvy trick to beguile a poor spendthrift youth in this way. The afternoon had come when the sheriff mounted his horse and joined Robin Hood, who stood outside the gateway of a paved court waiting for him, for he had sold his horse and cart to a trader for 2 marks. Then they set forth upon their way, the sheriff riding upon his horse, and Robin running beside him. Thus they left Nottingham town and travelled forward along the dusty highway, laughing and jesting together as though they had been old friends. But all the time the sheriff said within himself, Thy jest to me of Robin Hood shall cost thee dear, good fellow, even 400 pounds, thou fool. For he thought he would make at least that much by his bargain. So they journeyed onward till they came within the verge of Sherwood Forest, when presently the sheriff looked up and down, and to the right and to the left of him, and then grew quiet and ceased his laughter. Now, quoth he, may heaven and its saints preserve us this day from a rogue man called Robin Hood. Then Robin laughed aloud. Nay, said he, thou mayest set thy mind at rest, for well do I know Robin Hood, and well do I know that thou art in no more danger from him this day than thou art from me. At this the sheriff looked askance at Robin, saying to himself, I like not that thou seemest so well acquainted with this bold outlaw, and I wish that I were well out of Sherwood Forest. But still they travelled deeper into the forest shades, and the deeper they went, the more quiet grew the sheriff. At last they came to where the road took a sudden bend, and before them a herd of dun deer went tripping across the path. Then Robin came close to the sheriff, and pointing his finger, he said, "These are my horned beasts, good master sheriff. How dost thou like them? Are they not fat and fair to see?" At this the sheriff drew rein quickly. "Now, fellow," quoth he, "I would I were well out of the forest, for I like not thy company. Go thou thine own path, good friend, and let me but go mine." But Robin only laughed and caught the sheriff's bridle rein. "Nay," cried he, "stay a while, for I would thou shouldest see my brothers who own these fair horned beasts with me." So saying, he clapped his bugle horn to his mouth and winded 3 merry notes. And presently up the path came leaping 50 good stout yeomen with Little John at their head. "What wouldest thou have, good master?" quoth Little John. "Why," answered Robin, "dost thou not see that I have brought goodly company to feast with us today? Fie, for shame! Do you not see our good and worshipful master, the Sheriff of Nottingham? Take thou his bridle, Little John, for he has honoured us today by coming to feast with us." Then all doffed their hats humbly, without smiling or seeming to be in jest, while Little John took the bridle rein and led the palfrey still deeper into the forest, all marching in order, with Robin Hood walking beside the sheriff, hat in hand. All this time the sheriff never said a word, but only looked about him like one suddenly awakened from sleep. But when he found himself going within the very depths of Sherwood, his heart sank within him, for he thought, "Surely my 300 pounds will be taken from me, even if they take not my life itself, for I have plotted against their lives more than once." But all seemed humble and meek, and not a word was said of danger, either to life or money. So at last they came to that part of Sherwood Forest where a noble oak spread its branches wide, and beneath it was a seat all made of moss, on which Robin sat down, placing the sheriff at his right hand. "Now busk ye, my merry men all," quoth he, "and bring forth the best we have, both of meat and wine, for his worship the sheriff hath feasted me in Nottingham Guildhall today, and I would not have him go back empty." All this time nothing had been said of the sheriff's money, so presently he began to pluck up heart. "For," he said to himself, "may Robin Hood have forgotten all about it." Then, while beyond in the forest bright fires crackled, and savoury smells of sweetly roasting venison, and fat capons filled the glade, and brown pasties warmed beside the blaze, did Robin Hood entertain the sheriff right royally. First, several couples stood forth at quarterstaff, and so shrewd were they at the game, and so quickly did they give stroke and parry, that the sheriff, who loved to watch all lusty sports of the kind, clapped his hands, forgetting where he was, and crying aloud, well struck, thou fellow with the black beard," little knowing that the man he called upon was the tinker that tried to serve as warrant upon Robin Hood. Then several yeomen came forward and spread cloths upon the green grass, and placed the royal feast, while others still broached barrels of sack and malmsey, and good stout ale, and set them in jars upon the cloth, with drinking horns about them. Then all sat down and feasted and drank merrily together, until the sun was low, and the half-moon glimmered with a pale light betwixt the leaves of the trees overhead. Then the sheriff arose and said, "I thank you all, good yeomen, for the merry entertainment ye had given me this day. Right courteously have ye used me, showing therein that ye have much respect for our glorious king and his deputy in brave Nottinghamshire. But the shadows grow long, and I must away before darkness comes. lest I lose myself within the forest." Then Robin Hood and all his merry men arose also, and Robin said to the sheriff, "If thou must go, worshipful sir, go thou must, but thou hast forgotten one thing." "Nay, I forgot not," said the sheriff, yet all the same his heart sank within him. "But I say, thou hast forgot something," quoth Robin. "We keep a merry inn here in the greenwood, but whoever becometh our guest must pay his reckoning." Then the sheriff laughed. But the laugh was hollow. "Well, jolly boys," quoth he, "we have had a merry time together today, and even if ye had not asked me, I would have given you a score of pounds for the sweet entertainment I have had." "Nay," quoth Robin seriously, "it would ill beseem us to treat your worship so meanly. By my faith, Sir Sheriff, I would be ashamed to show my face if I did not reckon the king's deputy at 300 pounds. Is it not so, my merry men all?" "Then aye," cried all in a loud voice. "300 devils!" roared the sheriff. "Think ye that your beggarly feast was worth 3 pounds, let alone 300? "Nay," quoth Robin gravely, "speak not so roundly, your worship. I do love thee for the sweet feast thou hast given me this day in merry Nottingham town. But there be those here who love thee not so much. If thou wilt look down the cloth, thou wilt see Will Stutely, in whose eyes thou hast no great favour. Then 2 other stout fellows are there here that thou knowest not, that were wounded in a brawl nigh Nottingham town some time ago. Thou wottest when one of them was sore hurt in one arm, yet he hath got the use of it again. Good sheriff, be advised by me. Pay thy score without more ado, or maybe it may fare ill with thee." As he spoke, the sheriff's ruddy cheeks grew pale, and he said nothing more, but looked upon the ground and gnawed his nether lip. Then slowly he drew forth his fat purse and threw it upon the cloth in front of him. "Now take the purse, Little John," quoth Robin Hood, "and see that the reckoning be right. We would not doubt our sheriff, but he might not like it if he should find he had not paid his full score." Then Little John counted the money, and found that the bag held 300 pounds in silver and gold. But to the sheriff it seemed as if every clink of the bright money was a drop of blood from his veins. And when he saw it all counted out in a heap of silver and gold, filling a wooden platter, he turned away and silently mounted his horse. Never have we had so worshipful a guest before," quoth Robin, "and as the day waxeth late, I will send one of my young men to guide thee out of the forest depths." "Nay, heaven forbid," cried the sheriff hastily. "I can find my own way back. I can find mine own way, good man, without aid." "Then I will put thee on the right track, mine own self," quoth Robin. And taking the sheriff's horse by the bridle rein, he led him into the main forest path. Then, before he let him go, he said, "Now fare thee well, good sheriff, and when next thou thinkest to despoil some poor prodigal, remember thy feast in Sherwood Forest. Ne'er buy a horse, good friend, without first looking into its mouth, as our good gaffer Swanthold says. And so once more, fare thee well." Then he clapped his hands to the horse's back, and off went nag and sheriff through the forest glades. Then bitterly the sheriff rued the day that first he meddled with Robin Hood, for all men laughed at him, and many ballads were sung by folk throughout the country of how the sheriff went to shear and came home shorn to the very quick. For thus men sometimes overreach themselves through greed and guile. Little John goes to Nottingham Fair. Spring had gone since the sheriff's feast in Sherwood, and summer also, and the mellow month of October had come. All the air was cool and fresh, the harvests were gathered home, the young birds were full-fledged, the hops were plucked, and apples were ripe. But though time had so smoothed things over that men no longer talked of the horned beasts that the sheriff wished to buy, he was still sore about the matter, and could not bear to hear Robin Hood's name spoken in his presence. With October had come the time for holding the great fair, which was celebrated every 5 years at Nottingham town, to which folk came from far and near throughout the country. At such times archery was always the main sport of the day, for the Nottinghamshire yeomen were the best hand at the longbow in all merry England. But this year the sheriff hesitated a long time before he issued proclamation of the fair, fearing lest Robin Hood and his band might come to it. At first he had a great part of a mind not to proclaim the fair, but second thought told him that men would laugh at him and say among themselves that he was afraid of Robin Hood, so he put that thought by. At last he fixed in his mind that he would offer such a prize as they would not care to shoot for. At such times it had been the custom to offer a 50 of marks or a tun of ale. So this year he proclaimed that a prize of 2 fat steers should be given to the best bowman. When Robin Hood heard what had been proclaimed, he was vexed, and said, "Now beshrew this sheriff, that he should offer such a prize that none but shepherd hinds will care to shoot for it. I would have loved nothing better than to have another bout at merry Nottingham town, but if I should win this prize, naught would it pleasure or profit me." Then up spoke Little John. "Nay, but hearken, good master," said he. "Only today Will Stoutely, young David of Doncaster, and I were at the sign of the Blue Boar, and there we heard all the news of this merry fair, and also that the sheriff hath offered this prize, that we of Sherwood might not care to come to the fair. So, good master, if thou wilt, I would fain go and strive to win even this poor thing among the stout yeomen who will shoot at Nottingham town." "Nay, Little John," quoth Robin, "thou art a sound stout fellow, yet thou lackest the cunning that good Stuteley hath, and I would not have harm befall thee for all Nottinghamshire. Nevertheless, if thou wilt go, take some disguise, lest there be those there who may know thee." "So be it, good master," quoth Little John. "Yet all the disguise that I wish is a good suit of scarlet instead of this of Lincoln green. I will draw the cowl of my jacket about my head so that it will hide my brown hair and beard, and then I trust no one will know me." "It is much against my will," said Robin Hood. Ne'ertheless, if thou dost wish it, get thee gone, but bear thyself seemingly, Little John, for thou art mine own right-hand man, and I could ill bear to have harm befall thee." So Little John clad himself all in scarlet and started off to the fair at Nottingham town. Right merry were these fair days at Nottingham, when the green before the great town gate was dotted with booths standing in rows, with tents of many-coloured canvas, hung about with streamers and garlands of flowers, and the folk came from all the countryside, both gentle and common. In some booths there was dancing to merry music, in others flowed ale and beer, and in others yet, again, sweet cakes and barley sugar were sold, and sport was going outside the booths also. when some minstrel sang ballads of the olden time, playing a second upon the harp, or where the wrestlers struggled with one another within the sawdust ring. But the people gathered most of all around a raised platform where stout fellows played at quarterstaff. So Little John came to the fair. All scarlet were his hose and jerkin. The scarlet was his cowled cap, with a scarlet feather stuck in the side of it. Over his shoulders was slung a stout bow of yew, and across his back hung a quiver of good round arrows. Many turned to look after such a stout tall fellow, for his shoulders were broader by a palm's breadth than any that were there, and he stood a head taller than all the other men. The lasses also looked at him askance, thinking they had never seen a lustier youth. First of all he went to the booth where stout ale was sold, and standing aloft on a bench, he called to all that were near to come and drink with him. "Hey, sweet lads," cried he, "who will drink ale with a stout yeoman? Come all, let us be merry, for the day is sweet and the ale is tingling. Come hither, good yeoman, and thou, for not a farthing shall one of you pay. Nay, turn hither, thou lusty beggar, and thou jolly tinker, for all shall be merry with me." Thus he shouted, and all crowded around laughing, while the brown ale flowed, and they called Little John a brave fellow, each swearing that he loved him as his own brother, for when one has entertainment with nothing to pay, one loves the man that gives it to one. Then he strolled to the platform where they were at cudgel play, for he loved the bout at quarterstaff as he loved meat and drink. And here befell an adventure that was sung in ballads throughout the mid-country for many a day. One fellow there was that cracked crowns of everyone who threw cap into the ring. This was Eric O'Lincoln of great renown, whose name had been sung in ballads throughout the countryside. When Little John reached the stand, he found none fighting, but only bold Eric walking up and down the platform, swinging his staff and shouting lustily. "Now, who will come and strike a stroke for the lass he loves the best, with a good Lincolnshire yeoman? Come now, lads, step up, or else the lass's eyes are not bright hereabouts, or the blood of Nottingham youth is sluggish and cold. Lincoln against Nottingham, say I, for no one hath put foot upon the boards this day such as we of Lincoln call a cudgel player." At this, one would nudge another with his elbow, saying, "Go thou, Ned," or "Go thou, Thomas," but no lad cared to gain a cracked crown for nothing. Presently, Eric saw where Little John stood among the others, a head and shoulders above them all, and he called to him loudly, "Halloa, thou long-legged fellow in scarlet! Broad are thy shoulders and thick thy head. Is not thy lass fair enough for thee to take cudgel in hand for her sake? In truth, I believe that Nottingham men do turn to bone and sinew, for neither heart nor courage have they. Now, thou great lout, wilt thou not twirl staff for Nottingham?" "Aye," quoth Little John, "had I but my own good staff here, it would pleasure me hugely to crack thy knave's pate, thou saucy braggart. I wot it would be well for thee and thy cock's comb were cut." Thus he spoke, slowly at first, for he was slow to move, but his wrath gathered headway like a great stone rolling down a hill, so that at the end he was full of anger. Then Eric O'Lincoln laughed aloud. "Well spoken for one who fears to meet me fairly man to man," said he. "Saucy art thou thine own self, and if thou puttest foot upon these boards, I will make thy saucy tongue rattle within thy teeth." "Now," quoth Little John, Is there never a man here that will lend me a good stout staff till I try the mettle of yon fellow?" At this, half a score reached him their staves, and he took the stoutest and heaviest of them all. Then, looking up and down the cudgel, he said, "Now, I have in my hand but a splint of wood, a barley straw, as it were, yet I trow it will have to serve me, so here goeth." Thereupon he cast the cudgel upon the stand, and, leaping lightly after it, snatched it up in his hand again. Then each man stood in his place and measured the other with fell looks, until he that directed the sport cried, "Play!" At this they stepped forth, each grasping a staff tightly in the middle. Then those that stood around saw the stoutest game of quarterstaff that e'er Nottingham town beheld. At first Eric O'Lincoln thought that he would gain an easy advantage, so he came forth as if he would say, "Watch, good people, how that I carve you this cockerel right speedily." But he presently found it to be no such speedy matter. Right deftly he struck, with great skill of fence, but he had found his match in Little John. Once, twice, thrice he struck, and 3 times Little John turned the blows to the left hand and to the right. Then quickly, with a dainty backhanded blow, he rapped Eric beneath his guard so shrewdly that it made his head ring again. Then Eric stepped back to gather his wits, while a great shout went up, and all were glad that Nottingham had cracked Lincoln's crown, and thus ended the first bout of the game. Then presently the director of the sport cried, "Play!" and they came together again. But now Eric played warily, for he found his man was of right good mettle, and also he had no sweet memory of the blow that he had got. So this bout neither Little John nor the Lincoln man caught a stroke within his guard. Then, after a while, they parted again, and this made the second bout. Then for the 3rd time they came together, and at first Eric strove to be wary, as he had been before, but growing mad at finding himself so foiled, he lost his wits and began to rain blows so fiercely and so fast that they rattled like hail on penthouse roof. Tack, 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 tack. But in spite of all, he did not reach within Little John's guard. Then at last Little John saw his chance and seized it right cleverly. Once more with a quick blow he rapped Eric beside the head, and ere he could regain himself, Little John slipped his right hand down to his left, and with a swinging blow smote the other so sorely upon the crown that down he fell as though he would never move again. Then the people shouted so loud, "Hurrah! Hurrah!" that folk came running from all about to see what was the ado, while Little John leaped down from the stand and gave the staff back to him that had lent it to him. And thus ended the famous bout between Little John and Eric O'Lincoln of great renown. But now the time had come when those who were to shoot with the long bow were to take their places, so the people began flocking to the butts where the shooting was to be. Near the target, in a good place, sat the sheriff upon a raised dais, with many gentlefolk around him. When the archers had taken their places, the herald came forward and proclaimed the rules of the game, and how each should shoot 3 arrows, and to him that should shoot the best, the prize of 2 fat steers was to belong. A score of brave shots were gathered there, and among them some of the keenest hands at the longbow in Lincoln and Nottinghamshire. And among them Little John stood taller than all the rest. "Who is yon stranger clad in all scarlet?" said some, and others answered, "It is he that hath but now so soundly cracked the crown of Eric O'Lincoln." Thus the people talked among themselves until at last it reached even the sheriff's ears. And now each man stepped forward and shot in turn, but though each shot well, Little John was the best of all, for 3 times he struck the clout, and once only the length of a barleycorn from the centre. "Hey for the tall archer!" shouted the crowd, and some among them shouted, "Hey for Reynold Greenleaf!" for this was the name that Little John had called himself that day. Then the sheriff stepped down from the raised seat and came to where the archers stood. While all doffed their caps that saw him coming, he looked keenly at Little John, but did not know him, though he said after a while, "How now, good fellow? Methinks there is that about thy face that I have seen erewhile." "Mayhap it may be so," quoth Little John, "for often have I seen your worship." And as he spoke, he looked steadily into the sheriff's eyes, so that the latter did not suspect who he was. "A brave blade art thou, good friend," said the sheriff, "and I hear that thou hast well upheld the skill of Nottinghamshire against that of Lincoln this day. What may be thy name, good fellow?" "Men do call me Reynold Greenleaf, your worship," said Little John, and the old ballad that tells of this adds, "So in truth was he a green leaf, but of what manner of tree the sheriff wotted not." "Now, Reynold Greenleaf," quoth the sheriff, "thou art the fairest hand at the long bow that mine eyes ever beheld, next to that false knave Robin Hood, from whose wiles heaven forfend me. Wilt thou join my service, good fellow? Thou shalt be paid right well, for 3 suits of clothes shalt thou have a year, with good food and as much ale as thou canst drink. And besides this, I will pay thee 40 marks, each Michaelmastide." "Then here stand I a free man, and right gladly will I enter thy household," said Little John, for he thought he might find some merry jest should he enter the sheriff's service. "Fairly hast thou warned the fat steers," said the sheriff, "and hereunto I will add a butt of good March beer, for joy of having gotten such a man. For I wot thou shootest as fair a shaft as Robin Hood himself." "Then," said Little John, "for joy of having gotten myself into thy service, I will give fat steers and brown ale to all these good folk, to make them merry withal." At this arose a great shout, "Hurrah!" many casting their caps aloft for joy of the gift. Then some built great fires and roasted the steers, and others broached the butt of ale, with which all made themselves merry. Then, when they had eaten and drunk as much as they could, and when the day faded and the great moon arose, all red and round, over the spires and towers of Nottingham town, they joined hands and danced around the fires, to the music of bagpipes and harps. But long before this merry-making had begun, the sheriff and his new servant, Reynold Greenleaf, were in the castle of Nottingham. How Little John lived at the sheriff's. Thus Little John entered into the sheriff's service, and found the life he led there easy enough, for the sheriff made him his right-hand man, and held him in great favour. He sat nigh the sheriff at meat, and he ran beside his horse when he went a-hunting, so that what with hunting and hawking a little, and eating rich dishes and drinking good sack, and sleeping until late hours in the morning, he grew as fat as a stall-fed ox. Thus things floated easily along with the tide, until one day when the sheriff went a-hunting, there happened that which broke the smooth surface of things. The morning the sheriff and many of his men set forth to meet certain lords to go a-hunting, He looked all about him for his good man, Reynold Greenleaf, but not finding him, was vexed, for he wished to show Little John's skill to his noble friends. As for Little John, he lay abed, snoring lustily, till the sun was high in the heavens. At last he opened his eyes and looked about him, but did not move to arise. Brightly shone the sun in at the window, and all the air was sweet with the scent of woodbine that hung in sprays about the wall without. For the cold winter was past, and spring was come again. And Little John lay still, thinking how sweet was everything on this fair morn. Just then he heard, faint and far away, a distant bugle note, sounding thin and clear. The sound was small, but like a little pebble dropped into a glassy fountain. It broke all the smooth surface of his thoughts, until his whole soul was filled with disturbance. His spirit seemed to awaken from its sluggishness, and his memory brought back to him all the merry greenwood life, how the birds were singing blithely there this bright morning, and how his loved companions and friends were feasting and making merry, or perhaps talking of him with sober speech, for when he first entered the sheriff's service, he did so in jest. But the hearthstone was warm during the winter, and the fare was full, and so he had abided, putting off from day to day his going back to Sherwood, until 6 long months had passed. But now he thought of his good master and of Will Stutely, whom he loved better than any one in all the world, and of young David of Doncaster, whom he had trained so well in all manly sports, till there came over his heart a great and bitter longing for them all, so that his eyes filled with tears. Then he said aloud, "Here I grow fat like a stall-fed ox, and all my manliness departeth from me, while I become a sluggard and dolt. But I will arouse me and go back to mine own dear friends once more, and never will I leave them again till life doth leave my lips." So saying, he leaped from the bed, for he hated his sluggishness now. When he came downstairs, he saw the steward standing near the pantry door, a great fat man with a huge bundle of keys hanging to his girdle. Then Little John said, "Ho, Master Steward, a hungry man am I, for naught have I had for all this blessed morn. Therefore give me to eat." Then the steward looked grimly at him and rattled the keys in his girdle, for he hated Little John, because he had found favor with the sheriff. "So, Master Reynold Greenleaf, thou art an-hungered, art thou?" quoth he. "But, fair youth, if thou livest long enough, thou wilt find that he who getteth overmuch sleep for an idle head goeth with an empty stomach. For what saith the old saw, Master Greenleaf? Is it not, the late fowl findeth but ill faring? Now thou great purse of fat," cried Little John, "I ask thee not for fool's wisdom, but for bread and meat. Who art thou, that thou shouldest deny me to eat? By Saint Dunstan, thou hadst best tell me where my breakfast is, if thou wouldst save broken bones." Thy breakfast, Master Fireblaze, is in the pantry, answered the steward. Then fetch it hither, cried Little John, who waxed angry by this time. Go thou and fetch it thy own self, quoth the steward. Am I thy slave to fetch and carry for thee? I say, go thou, bring it me. I say, go thou, fetch it yourself. Fetch it for thyself. Ay, marry that I will, right quickly. Ay, marry that will I, right quickly, quoth Little John in a rage. And so saying, he strode to the pantry and tried to open the door, but found it locked, whereat the steward laughed and rattled his keys. Jingle, 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 jingle the keys. Then the wrath of Little John boiled over, and lifting his clenched fist, he smote the pantry door, bursting out 3 panels and making so large an opening that he could easily stoop and walk through it. When the steward saw what was done, he waxed mad with rage, and as Little John stooped to look within the pantry, he seized him from behind by the nape of the neck, pinched him sorely, and smiting him over the head with his keys, jingle-dee, 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 till the yeoman's ears rang again. At this Little John turned upon the steward and smote him in such a buffet that the fat man fell to the floor and lay there as though he would never move again. There, quoth Little John, think well of that stroke, never keep a good breakfast from a hungry man again. So saying, he crept into the pantry and looked about him to see if he could find something to appease his hunger. He saw a great venison pasty and 2 roasted capons, beside which was a platter of plover's eggs. Moreover, there was a flask of sack and 1 of canary, a sweet sight to a hungry man. These he took down from the shelves and placed upon a sideboard, and prepared to make himself merry. Now the cook, in the kitchen across the courtyard, heard the loud talking between Little John and the steward, and also the blow that Little John struck the other. So he came running across the court and up the stairway to where the steward's pantry was, bearing in his hands the spit with the roast still upon it. Meanwhile, the steward had gathered his wits about him and risen to his feet, so that when the cook came to the steward's pantry, he saw him glowering through the broken door at Little John, who was making ready for a good repast, as one dog glowers at another that has a bone. When the steward saw the cook, he came to him, and putting 1 arm over his shoulder, Alas, sweet friend, quoth he, for the cook was a tall, stout man, seest thou what that vile knave Reynold Greenleaf hath done? He hath broken in upon our master's goods, and hath smitten me a buffet upon the ear, so that I thought I was dead. Good cook, I love thee well, and thou shalt have a good pottle of our master's best wine every day, for thou art an old and faithful servant. Also, good cook, I have 10 shillings that I mean to give as a gift to thee. But hatest thou not to see a vile upstart like this Reynold Greenleaf taking it upon him so bravely? Ay, marry, that do I, quoth the cook boldly, for he liked the steward because of his talk of the wine and of the 10 shillings. Get thee gone straight away to thy room, and I will bring out this knave by his ears. So saying, he laid aside his spit and drew the sword that hung by his side. Shing! Whereupon the steward left as quickly as he could, for he hated the sight of naked steel. Then the cook walked straight away to the broken pantry door, through which he saw Little John tucking a napkin beneath his chin and preparing to make himself merry. "Why, how now, Reynold Greenleaf?" said the cook. "Thou art no better than a thief, I wot. Come thou straight forth, man, or I will carve thee as I would carve a suckling pig. Carve a sucking pig. Nay, good cook, bear thou thyself more seemingly, or else I will come forth to thy dole. At most times I am as a yearling lamb, but when one cometh between me and my meat, I am a raging lion, as it were." "Lion or no lion," quoth the valorous cook, "come thou straight forth, else thou art a coward heart as well as a knavish thief." "Ha!" cried Little John, "cowards' names have I never heard, so look to thyself, good cook, for I come forth straight, the roaring lion I did speak of but now." Then he too drew his sword and came out of the pantry. Then, putting themselves into position, they came slowly together with grim and angry looks. But suddenly Little John lowered his point. "Hold, good cook," said he. "Now I bethink me it were ill of us to fight with good victuals standing so nigh, and such a feast as would befit two stout fellows, such as we are. Marry, good friend, I think we should enjoy this fair feast ere we fight. What sayest thou, jolly cook?" At this speech the cook looked up and down, scratching his head in doubt, for he loved good feasting. At last he drew a long breath and said to Little John, "Well, good friend, I like thy plan right well. So, pretty boy, say I, let us feast, with all my heart, for one of us may sup in paradise before nightfall." So each thrust his sword back into the scabbard and entered the pantry. Then, after they had seated themselves, Little John drew his dagger and thrust it into a pie. "A hungry man must be fed," quoth he. "So, sweet chuck, I help myself without leave." But the cook did not lag far behind, for straightway his hands also were deeply thrust within the goodly pasty. After this, neither of them spoke further, but used their teeth to better purpose. But though neither spoke, they looked at one another, each thinking within himself that he had never seen a more lusty fellow than the one across the board. At last, after a long time had passed, the cook drew a full, deep breath, as though of much regret, and wiped his hands upon the napkin, for he could eat no more. Little John also had enough, for he pushed the pasty aside, as though he would say, "I want thee by me no more, good friend." Then he took the pootle of sack, and said he, "Now, good fellow, I swear by all that is bright that thou art the stoutest companion at eating that ever I had. Lo, I drink thy health." So saying, he clapped the flask to his lips and cast his eyes aloft, while the good wine flooded his throat. Then he passed the pottle to the cook, who also said, "Lo, I drink thy health, sweet fellow." Nor was he behind Little John in drinking any more than in eating. "Now," quoth Little John, "thy voice is right round and sweet, jolly lad. I doubt not thou canst sing a ballad most blithely, canst thou not?" "Truly, I have trolled one now and then," quoth the cook, "yet I would not sing alone." "Nay, truly," said Little John, "that were but ill courtesy. Strike up thy ditty, and I will afterward sing one to match it, if I can." "So be it, pretty boy," quoth the cook. "And hast thou e'er heard the song of the deserted shepherdess?" "Truly I know not," answered Little John, "but sing thou, and let me hear." Then the cook took another draught from the pottle, and clearing his throat, sang right sweetly. The Song of the Deserted Shepherdess. In Lenten time, when leaves wax green and pretty birds begin to mate, when lark-cloth sing and thrush, I ween, and stock-dove caweth soon and late. Fair Phyllis sat beside a stone, and thus I heard her make her moan. Oh, willow, 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 I'll take me off thy branches fair, and twine a wreath to deck my hair. The thrush hath taken him a she, the robin too, and eke the dove. My robin hath deserted me, and left me for another love. So here by brookside all alone, I sit me down and make my moan. Oh, willow, 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 I'll take me off thy branches fair, and twine a wreath to deck my hair. But ne'er came hearing from the sea, but good as he were in the tide, young Corydon came o'er the lea, and sat him Phyllis down beside. So presently she changed her tone, and 'gan to cease her from her moan. Oh, willow, 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 thou mayest e'en keep thy garlands fair, I want them not to deck my hair. Now by my faith, cried Little John, that same is a right good song, and hath truth in it also. Glad am I thou likest it, sweet lad, said the cook. Now sing thou one also, for ne'er should a man be merry alone, or sing and list not. Then I will sing thee a song of a right good knight of Arthur's court, and how he cured his heart's wound without running upon the dart again, as did thy Phyllis. For I wot she did but cure one smart by giving herself another. So list thou while I sing. The Good Knight and His Love. When Arthur King did rule this land, a goodly king he was, and had he of stout knights a band of merry company. Among them all, both great and small, a good stout knight was there, a lusty child and eke a tall, that loved a lady fair. But naught would she to do with he, but turned her face away. So gat he gone to far country, and left that lady gay. There all alone he made his moan, and eke did sob and sigh, and weep till it would move a stone, and weep till it would move a stone, and he was like to die. But still his heart did feel the smart, and eke the dire distress, and rather grew his pain more sharp, as grew his body less. Then gat he back where was good sack and merry company, and soon did cease to cry alack, when blithe and gay was he. From which I hold and feel full bold to say and eke believe, that gin the belly go not cold, the heart will cease to grieve. Now by my faith, cried the cook, as he rattled the pottle against the sideboard, I like that same song hugely, and eke the motive of it, which layeth like a sweet kernel in a hazelnut. Now thou art a man of shrewd opinions, quoth Little John, and I love thee truly as thou wert my brother. And I love thee too, but the day draweth on, and I have my cooking to do ere our master cometh home. So let us e'en go and settle this brave fight we have in hand. Aye, marry, quoth Little John, and that right speedily. Never have I been more laggard in fighting than in eating and drinking. So come thou straight forth into the passageway, where there is good room to swing a sword, and I will try to serve thee." Then they both stepped forth into the broad passage that led to the steward's pantry, where each man drew his sword again, shing, shing, and without more ado fell upon the other as though he would hew his fellow limb from limb. Then their swords clashed upon one another with great din, and sparks flew from each blow in showers. Cling, cling, clang. So they fought up and down the hall for an hour and more, neither striking the other a blow, though they strove their best to do so, for both were skilful at the fence. So nothing came of all their labour. Ever and anon they rested, panting, then after getting their wind, at it they would go again more fiercely than ever. At last Little John cried aloud, "Hold, good cook!" whereupon each rested upon his sword, panting. "Now will I make my vow," quoth Little John. "Thou art the very best swordsman that ever mine eyes beheld. Truly I had thought to carve thee ere now." "And I had thought to do the same by thee," quoth the cook, "but I have missed the mark somehow." "Now I have been thinking within myself," quoth Little John, "what are we fighting for? But albeit I do not rightly know." "Why, no more do I," said the cook. "I bear no love for that Percy steward, but I thought that we had engaged to fight with one another, and that it must be done." "Now," quoth Little John, "it doth seem to me that instead of striving to cut one another's throats, it were better for us to be boon companions. What sayest thou, jolly cook? Wilt thou go with me to Sherwood Forest, and join with Robin Hood's band? Thou shalt live a merry life within the woodlands, and 70 good companions shalt thou have, one of whom is mine own self. Thou shalt have 3 suits of Lincoln green each year, and 40 marks in pay." "Now, thou art a man of my own heart," cried the cook right heartily, and as thou speakest of it, that is the very service for me. I will go with thee, and that right gladly. Give me thy palm, sweet fellow, and I will be thine own companion from henceforth. What may be thy name, lad?" "Men do call me Little John, good fellow." "How? And art thou indeed Little John, and Robin Hood's own right-hand man? Many a time and oft I heard of thee, but never did I hope to set eyes upon thee, and thou art indeed the famous Little John." And the cook seemed lost in amazement, and looked upon his companion with open eyes. "I am Little John indeed, and I will bring to Robin Hood this day a right stout fellow to join his merry band. But ere we go, good friend, it seemeth to me to be a vast pity that, as we have had so much of the sheriff's food, we should not also carry off some of his silver plate to Robin Hood as a present from his worship." "Aye, merry it is," said the cook. And so they began hunting about, and took as much silver as they could lay hands upon, clapping it into a bag. And when they had filled the sack, they set forth to Sherwood Forest. Plunging into the woods, they came at last to the greenwood tree, where they found Robin Hood and 60 of his merry men lying upon the fresh green grass. When Robin and his men saw who it was that came, they leaped to their feet. "Now welcome," cried Robin Hood. "Now welcome, Little John, for long hath it been since we have heard from thee, though we all knew that thou hadst joined the sheriff's service. And how hast thou fared all these long days?" "Right merrily have I lived at the Lord Sheriff's," answered Little John, "and I have come straight thence. See, good master, I have brought thee his cook, and even his silver plate. Thereupon he told Robin Hood and his merry men that were there all that had befallen him since he had left them to go to the fair at Nottingham town. Then all shouted with laughter, except Robin Hood, but he looked grave. "Nay, Little John," said he, "thou art a brave blade and a trusty fellow. I am glad thou hast brought thyself back to us, and with such a good companion as the cook, whom we all welcome to Sherwood. But I like not so well that thou hast stolen the sheriff's plate like some paltry thief. The sheriff hath been punished by us, and hath lost 300 pounds, even as he sought to despoil another, but he hath done naught that we should steal his household plate from him." Though Little John was vexed with this, he strove to pass it off with a jest. "Nay, good master," quoth he, "if thou thinkest the sheriff gave us not the plate, I will fetch him, that he may tell us with his own lips he giveth it all to us." So saying, he leaped to his feet, and was gone before Robin could call him back. Little John ran for full 5 miles till he came to where the sheriff of Nottingham and a gay company were hunting near the forest. When Little John came to the sheriff, he doffed his cap and bent his knee. "God save thee, good master," quoth he. "Why, Reynold Greenleaf," cried the sheriff, "whence comest thou, and where hast thou been?" "I have been in the forest," answered Little John, speaking amazedly. "And there I saw a sight, such as ne'er before man's eyes beheld. Yonder I saw a young hart, all in green from top to toe, and about him was a herd of 60 deer, and they too were all of green from head to foot. Yet I dared not shoot, good master, for fear lest they should slay me." "Why, how now, Reynold Greenleaf," cried the sheriff, "art thou dreaming, or art thou mad, that thou dost bring me such a tale?" "Nay, I am not dreaming, nor am I mad," said Little John, "and if thou wilt come with me, I will show thee this fair sight, for I have seen it with mine own eyes. But thou must come alone, good master, lest the others frighten them and they get away." So the party all rode forward, and Little John led them downward into the forest. "Now, good master," quoth he at last, "we are nigh where I saw this herd." Then the sheriff descended from his horse, and bade them wait for him until he should return, and Little John led him forward through a close copse, until suddenly they came to a great open glade, at the end of which Robin Hood sat beneath the shade of the great oak tree, with his merry men all about him. "See, good master sheriff," quoth Little John, "yonder is the hart of which I spake to thee." And at this the sheriff turned to Little John and said bitterly, "Long ago I thought I remembered thy face, but now I know thee. Woe betide thee, Little John, for thou hast betrayed me this day." In the meantime, Robin Hood had come to them. "Now welcome, Master Sheriff," said he. "Hast thou come today to take another feast with me?" "Nay, heaven forbid," said the sheriff, in tones of deep earnest. "I care for no feast, and have no hunger today." "Nevertheless," quoth Robin, "if thou hast no hunger, maybe thou hast thirst, and well I know thou wilt take a cup of sack with me. But I am grieved that thou wilt not feast with me, for thou couldst have victuals to thy liking, for there stands thy cook." Then he led the sheriff willy-nilly to the seat he knew so well beneath the greenwood tree. "Ho, lads," cried Robin, "fill our good friend the sheriff a right brimming cup of sack, and fetch it hither, for he is faint and weary." Then one of the band brought the sheriff a cup of sack, bowing low as he handed it to him. But the sheriff could not touch the wine, for he saw it served in one of his own silver flagons, on one of his own silver plates. "How now," quoth Robin, "dost thou not like our new silver service? We have gotten a bag of it this day." So saying, he held up the sack of silver that Little John and the cook had brought with them. Then the sheriff's heart was bitter within him, but not daring to say anything, he only gazed upon the ground. Robin looked keenly at him for a time before he spoke again. Then said he, "Now, Master Sheriff, the last time thou camest to Sherwood Forest, thou didst come seeking to despoil a poor spendthrift, and thou wert despoiled thine own self. But now thou comest seeking to do no harm, nor do I know that thou hast despoiled any man. I take my tithes from fat priests and lordly squires, to help those that they despoil, and to raise up those that they bow down. But I know not that thou hast tenants of thine own whom thou hast wronged in any way. Therefore take thou thine own again, nor will I dispossess thee today of so much as 1 farthing. Come with me, and I will lead thee from the forest back to thine own party again." Then, slinging the bag upon his shoulder, he turned away, the sheriff following him, all too perplexed in mind to speak. So they went forward until they came to within a furlong of the spot where the sheriff's companions were waiting for him. Then Robin Hood gave the sack of silver back to the sheriff. "Take thou thine own again," he said, "and hearken to me, good sheriff. Take thou a piece of advice with it. Try thy servants well, ere thou dost engage them again so readily." Then turning, he left the other standing bewildered, with the sack in his hands. The company that waited for the sheriff were all amazed to see him come out of the forest bearing a heavy sack upon his shoulders. But though they questioned him, he answered never a word, acting like one who walks in a dream. Without a word, he placed the bag across his nag's back, and then mounting, rode away, all following him. But all the time there was a great turmoil of thoughts within his head, tumbling one over the other, and thus ends the merry tale of Little John, and how he entered the sheriff's service.